The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. There was a wedding at Cana in Galilee, and the mother of Jesus was there. Jesus and his disciples were also invited to the wedding. When the wine ran short, the mother of Jesus said to him, "They have no wine." And Jesus said to her, "Woman, how does your concern affect me? My hour has not yet come." His mother said to the servers, "Do whatever he tells you." Now there were 6 stone water jars there for Jewish ceremonial washings, each holding 20 to 30 gallons. Jesus told them, "Fill the jars with water." So they filled them to the brim. Then he told them, "Draw some out now and take it to the head waiter." So they took it. And when the head waiter tasted the water that had become wine without knowing where it came from, although the servers who had drawn the water knew, the head waiter called the bridegroom and said to him, "Everyone serves good wine first, and then when people have drunk freely, an inferior one. But you have kept the good wine until now." Jesus did this as the beginning of his signs at Cana in Galilee, and so revealed his glory, and his disciples began to believe in him. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Previously in the homilies, you may remember in the last 2 weeks, we've been talking about epiphanies. On the Feast of the Epiphany of the Lord, when the Magi came to visit the Christ child, I shared with you a thought that if we don't have epiphanies in our faith, if we don't have epiphanies in our religion, if we don't have epiphanies in our relationship with God, new experiences of God, new realizations about God, new manifestations of God, whatever word you want to use there, that our faith has the problem of falling flat. It can become almost by rote, a repeat every year, every week, every day of the same old, without any new experience or authentic experience of the God who loves us and cherishes us and holds us. That epiphanies are absolutely necessary if as a people of God we are to grow. I think it would be much like if your relationship with your family or your friends, if you never had any new experiences with them. If there was never anything new to find out, new to do, new to talk about, let's face it, those relationships would go flat. The same is true of our relationship with God. And last week I shared with you that there are 3 stories in particular from the Scriptures that the church sees as specific epiphanies of Christ. Last week, the baptism of the Lord. This week, the water into wine, and of course, the Feast of the Epiphany itself. Last week, we talked about how it's possible that in Mark and Luke's gospel, the epiphany that takes place is a revelation of Jesus to himself as the Christ, as the one whom God had chosen, in whom he was well pleased, and how that calls us to reflect on that same reality from our baptism, that God chooses us, with us, God is well pleased. And of course, 2 weeks ago on Epiphany, the realization that Jesus is for all peoples, not just the Gentiles, or excuse me, not just the Jewish people, but for the Gentiles as well. A light for all nations, that he is Jesus, a name which means God with us. And that's important, that his name means God with us. Names are important and powerful, and so very often I think we underestimate that reality. For us in our lives, names often serve simply as ways to label people, to tell one person apart from another. But as we've talked about before, names in ancient Israel were extraordinarily powerful. To know the name of someone was to know something of their inner character, of who they were. It gave away their identity and what they were about, which is one of the reasons why Moses, when confronted with the burning bush, tries to get the name of God. Who should I say sent me? And God simply says, I am. Existence. Gives away something of the inner being of who God is. I've shared with you before that my own name, when I think about it and rely on it, has made a difference in my life in many important moments. When there's decisions to make or difficult things to do or confrontations to be had, my name, Mark, actually comes from the Roman god of war, Mars, and it means warrior or protector or defender. My middle name is David, meaning of or from God. And it might sound a little goofy, protector, defender, warrior of God, from God. I like to think of it as Jedi Knight. But at the right moment, calling on that reality of my life has made a difference. I hope that you know what the meaning of your name is, because really, they are powerful. There's something there, and even though we might not reflect upon it, we know that truth. I mean, parents take such care in choosing names for their children that have meaning or purpose behind them. We always want to make sure that people get our name right. Here's my name. This is how you spell it. This is how you say it. Let's get it right. And even as children, we know just how much harm we can inflict when you make fun of someone's name. We know that there is a power in those things. And ancient Israel was very much aware of that. The prophet Isaiah, whom we hear for our first reading today, on this Epiphany feast of water turned into wine, knows the power of names as well. I couldn't help but when I read that to see almost the prophet like jumping off the page. He's so excited, almost with like childlike enthusiasm today. For Zion's sake, I will not be quiet. For Jerusalem's sake, I will not be still. What has got this guy so excited? What's got him ready to shout out? He's not going to shut up until the vindication of Zion shines forth like a lantern. Well, the people have returned to Israel after being in exile, and while they're facing hard times, and still have more hard times ahead of them, Isaiah sees something new for them. People have been calling them, as you heard, desolate, and their land forsaken. That was the way they were being described. That was a name for Israel, if you will. But Isaiah is jumping up and down because he says, you shall be called by a new name. And it's not a name that's going to be given to the people by a king. It's not a name that's going to be given to them by another people or another nation. It's a name that will be pronounced by the Lord your God. A name pronounced by the Lord your God, which means there's something new at work. As you know in the scriptures, so very often, people get new names when they take on a new role. Like Simon becomes Peter. Abram becomes Abraham. Saul becomes Paul when there's a change in their existence and in their purpose. And Israel's about to get a new name. And what is that new name? My delight. The espoused. As Isaiah says, God will marry his people the way that a young man marries a virgin. So your builder will marry you. What an amazing image. What an amazing new name to be called the espoused of God, the delight of God. And so Israel waits. Isaiah's excited for a wedding. In John's gospel today, that wedding is on. Oh, not the wedding of whatever couple got married in Cana in Galilee, but the wedding of God and his people. In this first sign that Jesus performs in John, God is saying something amazing. Last Lent, we talked a lot about how in John's gospel there are no miracles. John never calls them miracles. He calls them signs because they're supposed to point to a deeper reality and lead to a deeper faith in Jesus. And this first sign that John records for us, I don't think it's any mistake that it happens at a wedding. But it is really an interesting sign if you think about it. As always, Jesus meets a human need with some divine intervention. But what's so interesting about this human need, I guess, is, at least in my opinion of it, it's not a need that's serious, like curing the blind, or bringing the dead back to life, or healing the sick, or even feeding hungry, starving crowds of people. He's at a party and the bar goes dry. it doesn't have the same sort of, I don't know, whatever that it needs to have. I mean, yes, running short of wine would have been embarrassing for the family, okay? But I doubt that Jesus is out to heal embarrassment or keep them from embarrassment. They were obviously a well-off family. I mean, they had servants. They've got 6 large stone water jars, which are not inexpensive things to have. And so this first sign really doesn't meet any deep need, but it says something. It says something. And I think we need to pause with that as Jesus provides this abundance of wine. And to get to the meat of it, I think it's God saying this, that he has saved the best for last. That Jesus comes with an abundance. That the wedding is underway. And much more than the law that he gave Moses or even the land that he gave to Israel, Christ comes with grace and salvation and more than we can imagine and more than we can ever think of. The bridegroom comes to his bride with an abundance. Not just what we need, but so much more. So much more. As God makes abundant wine in anticipation of the wedding feast that Israel has been waiting for. I don't know, maybe there's an epiphany for you. Maybe there's the revelation, the manifestation. I mean, we are used to thinking of ourselves as sons and daughters, children of God. We talked about that last week. But have you ever considered yourself the spouse of God? The spouse of God. I said that at the last Mass and saw someone go, ugh. I thought, you know what? That's not me making that up. That's Hosea. God, speaking through Hosea, uses the image of being married to his people. In Isaiah, God uses the image of being married to his people. We so often will call the church the bride of Christ. There's a reason for that. We refer to God as the beloved because what God wants is that kind of spousal relationship with us where everything is on the table. Nothing is held back. Everything is there and God is with us through the thick and the thin of life. And a spousal relationship is so very much different than the often at arm's length sort of cool Facebook friend relationship that we can get really comfortable with God. And that sort of at arm's length, cool Facebook friend relationship with God will never bring about any change in our life, any epiphany in our life, any manifestation in our life, any growth in our life, any true holiness in our life. If you were to consider God the way you consider your spouse, to see him as intimately involved in every aspect of your life as that, how might your relationship with him change? How might it be different? It's a challenging idea, I think, and one full of profound possibility for us. I don't know, we may think, I'm okay with things as they are with God, which is fine. However, make sure that you're not just drinking water when God offers you abundant wine.